What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Christian Hanna Horror here. And today, guys, we're going to be talking about 1999's Idle Hands. So a little bit about Idle Hands. I had not seen this movie, and I did a Facebook post saying, hey, checking this out for the first time. Overwhelming positive response. People were all saying, you're going to love this movie. You're going to love this movie. You're going to love it. Oh my God, how have you not seen it? And I don't know. I never even heard of Idle Hands. It's just one of those things, I guess. You know, sometimes you just don't see a movie that's, I guess, popular. But we'll talk more about that in a second. So, Idle Hands. I'm not the most articulate horror YouTuber. If you watch my channel, if you're a longtime viewer, if you're new, I'm just not. So, right off the bat, I just want to say, absolutely loved Idle Hands. My God, I love this movie. You know, I'm a Seth Green fan, so knowing he was in this movie after I got it, I was like, oh great, Seth Green's in this. So, of course, he was, you know, the whole cast of Idle Hands was so good. The lead actor, Devon Sawa, I believe, he had that perfect temperament. Now, this is the late 90s. You know, this is 1999 specifically. Pot, no care attitude, punk rock revival, all that was what was going on, I guess, with the youth of America. And this movie just nailed it perfectly. I'm talking perfect temperament. The music was great. You know, the characters were great. It was, when I get asked this question, guys, like, Christian, what is your favorite horror genre or subgenre? Horror comedy is my all-time favorite. I love a good horror comedy. It's my all-time favorite genre on the planet. Idle Hands delivered as a horror comedy so well. I loved it so much. You know, here's what I would call Idle Hands. Get yourself a big pot. Throw in the late 90s. Throw in a little bit of Evil Dead 2. Throw in a little bit of American Werewolf in London. Throw in the late 90s punk era music. Stir it up. Some practical effects, a little bit of CGI, and then you've got Idle Hands. And I thought this movie delivered like nobody's business. I can't say how much I loved it. I mean, I really just loved this movie. So Idle Hands, it starts out with this kid who wakes up the next morning after his parents were horribly murdered in the house. And, you know, him and his friends, after he accidentally kills his friends because he finds out his hand is losing its mind and attacking people, he realizes, oh my God, I was the one who killed my parents, but it wasn't me. My hand is possessed. What's going on? And so the story develops there. It doesn't need to be more than it is. It's a horror comedy with just the funniest dialogue, well written, perfectly executed, late 90s magic. And it's really a shame, guys, that I hadn't seen this movie, because you guys were right. Idle Hands was so absolutely hysterically funny. And it just delivered. I mean, from start to finish, had my attention the entire way. You know, when you talk about the late 90s, you talk about I Know What You Did Last Summer. Of course, you talk about Scream. You talk about, you know, The Craft. You got to talk about Valentine. Talk about, you know, Urban Legend. You got to talk about Idle Hands, because not only is Idle Hands now one of my favorite late 90s movies, it's looking down at the rest of the list. I adored this movie so much. I loved the scenery, and also it took place during Halloween. And here's the good thing about that. That was just an added fun element. You know, fortunately, this movie wasn't just trying to, you know, live off of the fact that it's taking place during Halloween time, because God knows we've probably seen some Halloween time movies that just like, oh, if this wasn't taking place during Halloween time or whatever, I might turn this off, you know. That was not the case. This actually had, you know, that was the least important thing, was the fact that it took place during Halloween time, which is a good thing, because the subject matter of the movie was just so great. I mean, I really loved Idle Hands so much. You know, just really nice scenes, especially the scenes where the guys got to sit and talk and be themselves, like character development, if you will. You know, it was fun, but it didn't last too long. Like when something needed to happen, something happened. And the horror was hilarious. Just, you know, great stuff. I think the director who did this movie actually directed Leprechaun 2. He looked just like the guy from the Leprechaun 2 interview on the Blu-ray set. So I think that might be the same guy. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I think it's the same guy. Let's talk about this Blu-ray and what I think of it. So, you know, this was probably an amazing way to introduce myself to the movie, was this Scream Factory Blu-ray. The picture, of course, looked great. The music and stuff was just loud and crazy and sounded so good. And the interviews are great in this. They have a lot of interviews. I saw maybe 4 interviews from this. Unfortunately, I didn't see Seth Green's interview, but they had a lot of the cast and the director who interviewed, and he actually talked about why this movie might have taken a bad dip during its release. Unfortunately, this movie came out 10 days after Columbine. If you're a younger viewer, Columbine was this horrible, attack at these kids who were just going through the school and killing people, horrible stuff, which unfortunately we see a lot of that nowadays. But, it was a big deal on that one when it happened, and the government and government officials were going out and talking about, we need to stop violence in movies, and this movie got named specifically. So I think that might have deterred people from going to see it after everything that was going on. But anyway, I think that might be part of the reason why maybe I never heard of it. I don't know, but I never heard of it. But anyway, great information, great interviews, great picture quality, great artwork, idle hands. I cannot literally recommend this enough. So let me know your history with the film, guys. If you've seen this movie, I'd love to know. What were your thoughts on initial release? If you saw it back then, what are your thoughts on the film in general? If you have seen it, where do you rank it in your 90s horror films? This movie is so high for me now. Loved it. It's different. It's so different. It's like The Faculty. It's just not a slasher during that era. Thank you. I love slashers, but give me something different every now and again, and this movie did it. So check it out, guys. And if you haven't seen Idle Hands, I'll tell you what everybody on Facebook told me. You're going to love it.